Hey, welcome to the Trapital Podcast. I'm Dan Runcie. Our guest today is the founder, CEO of Heavy Sound Labs, founder of Grand Hustle Entertainment, one of the investors back in All Def Digital, Jason Jeter. Welcome to the podcast, man.
Dan, thanks for having me. I'm a big fan of the podcast, so it's pretty exciting to be here with you.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you could come through. And I mean, I feel like people that have been following hip hop and looking at your career for a while, I mean, you've been a veteran in this game for a minute now. And
Yeah.
you started Grand Hustle with T.I. when you were both really young. I mean, let's start there. Back then, you knew that you wanted to get into the music industry. I mean, you had the internships early on. What was it specifically that had you focus on to say, not only do I want to be in this industry, but I want to ride with this guy, T.I., and I want to get into management?
Well, I knew I wanted to be in the music business because that's pretty much all that I knew. I grew up in New York, growing up throughout the 80s and 90s, in New York City, and you think hip hop was just super, exploding everywhere. Specifically, New York was the epicenter of that, right? The founding, the Bronx. I lived in the Bronx for a few years. I'll tell a story. Joeski Love lived in my buildings. I lived in Parkchester in the Bronx. There were a lot of rappers in my building. Sweet T and Craig G was around there. It was just like a lot of rappers. It was like rap everywhere. So for me, it was just something that I just fell in love with at a very early age. The culture. I saw the movie Crush Groove, and that's really when I was exposed to the business side of things. I tell the story. I was born in Brooklyn, born into an apartment full of records on Eastern Parkway, right across the street from the library, the Brooklyn Library, the Botanical Garden, the Brooklyn Museum. My father was a record collector, and he was a DJ. He made tapes for people within the community. So for me, once I saw the movie, that's really when I got exposed to the business side of the music business, But being born in an apartment full of records, some of the first things that I started reading were the back of album covers, and reading credits, So I was already kind of like conditioned in a certain way, just being that I knew who engineers were and what mastering was, and just these things that a young kid typically didn't know, especially during this time when information wasn't as readily available as today. So fast forward, I get internships, which really also solidifies I don't want to just be a fan of the culture and participate in the culture. I actually want to contribute to the building of the culture. Interned at Arista Records in my senior year in high school in New York. And during this time, Bad Boy was on fire. This is 1995. Bad Boy was on fire. LaFace Records, was also distributed through Arista. That company was on fire. Rowdy Records was just starting up out of Atlanta, Dallas, Austin, and he was doing his thing. So, it was great, man. I interned for Jeff Burrows, who went on and ran Bad Boy Records, and that was it. That was me seeing like, hey, I can get paid really well doing what I love to do. It only makes sense now.
And you had one of these internships when you were in high school, right?
Yeah. I kind of stretched the truth a little bit, So I was going to high school in Montclair, New Jersey, at Montclair High School, and most of these internships, they want you to be in college, So I literally, just kind of worked some some finesse, and I said I was a freshman at Montclair State University, and that's how I got my internship. And I would come after school, I would get on the bus and leave, high school, boom, right out of school early, on early days, and shoot over to the city on the bus and literally work for free a few days a week, and actually paid to go and work for free a few days a week, So yeah, that was my first start, my first inside look, at an early age, and that was really beneficial because it really truly helped me really decide this is what I want to do for sure.
Well played. No one had to teach you the hustle. You had it from the jump.
Absolutely. Grew up that way for sure.
So talk to me about how you and Tip connected.
Man, so I eventually made it to Atlanta and started working at Patchwork Recording Studio. Patchwork was a new young studio. It existed in a house. They operated out of a house, and upstairs was independent record label. They had artists Razkaz, Mean Green, rest in peace to Mean Green. He just passed a week ago, and a guy named Mr. Voodoo. And then downstairs they had a recording studio, you know, and interned upstairs, worked records at college radio, you know, and then downstairs I worked the front desk, you know. So as I worked the front desk, I kind of just was in the intersection of all traffic, working this front desk, you know. So I'm meeting producers, artists, A&Rs, managers, entourage who also become people of their own, you know, with success and time. And I met DJ Toomp. You know, DJ Toomp was a producer, local producer out of Atlanta, and he was a super dope producer, you know, and we began to form a relationship outside of the studio. You know, we started connecting, and I'm like, wow, this guy is, to me, you know, I felt like he was like a Manny Fresh, you know, he was like a Dr. Dre, a DJ Premier, like, you know, he was the type of producer that could really hold down a whole sound, you know, but he needed an artist to really display that sound on, you know. So I told him how I felt, and I said, yo, let's find an artist, you know, to work on, you know, because me coming to Atlanta, already having this experience at Arista Records, I initially just really wanted to be an A&R, you know. When I got to Atlanta, I said I have to position myself, you know, in the flow of traffic to meet people, and because I didn't know anybody in Atlanta. You know, I just knew that this is where it was at, so I just wanted to be where it was at, you know. So I made that early bet and put myself in a recording studio. But then I knew that my next thing was I have to, if I want to be an A&R, I have to be an A&R now. I can't wait for anyone to give me permission to be an A&R or ask anybody to be an A&R. I have to get out here and create something, you know, and this was going to make me an A&R, you know. So this was actually my second experience. I had an experience before this that went really well with Raekwon, who came down, him and Power, shout out to Power, it's a good friend of mine. And they came down to Atlanta and they worked out of the studio. And I ended up, I had producers, you know, so I ended up providing a producer, a guy named Trife, shout out to Trife. And he ended up doing like 6 songs on Raekwon's album, Immobiliary, you know. So these experiences, you know, kind of all leading up to this T.I. scenario, you know. And with DJ Toomp, we met, hit it off, agreed to go get an artist, and eventually found an artist, young T.I., you know, and we both thought that he was dope. He had some songs recorded with his friends. You know, he had a crew called the PSC. So he had records recorded, and, you know, it'd be like 5 guys on a record, and you're like, damn, who's that? Okay, that's him. You know, and then the next record, who's that? Oh, same guy. You know, so he just kind of obviously stood out, you know, and we met, hit it off, and 3 days later, went in the studio and recorded records.
Dope.
Yeah.
Yeah, because the first one was I'm Serious, right?
Yeah, correct. Yep. First record, the release was I'm Serious through Ghetto Vision / LaFace / Arista Records.
Nice. Yeah.
Yep.
And I think one of the things that sticks out about his career specifically from an early stage, he was not just about rap itself. And of course, he could be very successful, continue to do that, but he was diversifying what he was interested in, the businesses that he got involved with. And I assume a lot of that was you and him looking at it together, being like, hey, let's look big picture, broader. What do we want to achieve? What does this look like?
Absolutely. You know, for me, once again, I was a fan of the culture. You know, I got to spend some time around Rockefeller very early, you know, from a distance though, not like internally, you know, but I had access to Relativity Records through a friend of mine, Hussein Fatal, from the Outlaws, used to rap with Tupac. Rest in peace, Fatal. He passed a few years ago, but he was a friend that I grew up with. You know, in Montclair, New Jersey, I grew up with Young Noble, Yaki Gaddafi, Fatal from the Outlaws, you know, and he got a record deal at Relativity Records and pretty much gave me an opportunity to just come and be a part of his entourage. You have access, get in when you fit in, you know. And during this time, Rockefeller was in the same building. So this is like 96, and and this is obviously early Rockefeller, right? Reasonable Doubt. This is when the stories that you hear about the E320 with the promo wrap. It was actually in front of the building. I was there, you know.
Dope.
So this was like early days, and this is me being a fan of the culture and trying to figure out my position and my way, and seeing this stuff, you know. So for me, I was the kid who went to Fat Farm on Prince Street, you know, when Russell Simmons opened that store up. So it's certain things that you just automatically know, right? Like, hey, when I get on and I get hot, you know, and especially if I have an artist that's marketable, we got to do this, we got to do that, we have to do this, you know, just from the people who have been successful that came before us. So therefore, we knew that when we had some traction in music, we're going to go into film. We're going to go into clothing. We wanted to go into liquor, you know,
Right,
like
right.
those are just like go-to things to do if it made sense, you know?
Yeah. And I think Rockefeller did that well early on. I mean, of course, Rockaware, but then they had Rock Films, like state property. Like you saw the blueprint. Obviously, it's unfortunate how things folded out between him and
Sure.
Jay at the time, but the blueprint was there for how this is done. And even when I'm having conversations, you're having conversations with people building these labels now, they're all
Yep.
referencing what they had done.
It's all the same thing, right? We know so often you don't have to invent something new. You just have to modify, you know, what's already there. Yeah.
And I think it's cool with Tip as well. You're seeing a lot of that still come through, right? Like he's in these Ant-Man movies. He's with this
Yeah.
Netflix Hustle and Flow. He has
Yeah.
his Expeditiously podcast as well. So he's
Yep.
continued to do that and reinvent. Like that's not something that's stopping for him anytime
Absolutely.
soon.
Absolutely. As it shouldn't, you know, it shouldn't stop for either one of us, right? Like, you know, it's just going to look different, you know, and that's really the thing. I feel like, you know, as we grow and we evolve, things just look different.
Yeah. And you
Yeah.
clearly have an eye, as you mentioned, you want to become better as an A&R. You saw the talent and Tip, and then many years later, you see this kid from Houston with just 500 YouTube views named Travis
Yeah.
Scott and discover that. How is that different in terms of the discovery and also how the landscape had changed at that point compared to how things were with Tip, you know, a decade plus earlier?
Sure. To me, like you said, this new evolution of change within the culture of hip hop, things going digital, right? Like I feel like he was pretty much the beginning of that, you know, at the cusp of that. Of course, there it was already happening, but you know, this was during that Tumblr era, you know, and seeing Travis YouTube video 500 and change views, you know.
Was this
DJ
a song he
MLK.
had or was it a personal video?
No, this was a song. I hate
Okay.
to say it. I can't remember the song. No, this was a song. I can't remember the name of the song, but this was a song. And he had, you know, directed the video. And to me, I'm an aesthetic person. I'm like culture, lifestyle, all of that. You know, I look at an artist and, you know, like you said, with someone like T.I., like I get excited about artists that, you know, that, okay, you can build multiple businesses around, you know. And when I saw it, it was just so obvious. It just screamed it off the screen, you know. And that's why I tell people, like, creativity doesn't cost a lot of money at all. You know, this guy, you know, he shot a video that was pretty, you know, do it yourself, right? Like it was definitely, you could see that, oh, you did this yourself for real. But it was dope though. It was like, wow, I see the creativity. I see, you know, you have so many artistic type of references in the video. And which made me say to DJ MLK, hey, can you get him on the phone right now? You know, and jumped on the phone with Travis. It must have been like a Thursday. I'm in Atlanta. He's in LA. And on Saturday, I'm on Melrose at my friend's store, Chuck's Vintage at the time. She had a vintage denim shop, you know, and I'm meeting with Travis in the back of her store, you know, on Saturday afternoon now, you know, because to me, it was just urgent. You know, when I saw him, obviously Kanye was like huge at this time. You know, this is 2012. You know, Kanye's huge. You know, and you hate to say it, but it's back to even like you said with the Rockefeller thing, right? Like you don't have to reinvent anything. right? Like there's definitely trend forecasting. There's definitely, so seeing what Travis was doing at this young age and seeing what Kanye was on this macro level, it was like a no-brainer, man. It was like, so met with him on Saturday, and we ended up, I actually left. It's funny because I left before he did. I went back to Atlanta. Travis was supposed to meet with Atlantic Records on that Monday. He was supposed to fly to New York, meet with Atlantic Records on Monday. And of course, I gave my pitch, and I got a little extra time to spend with him. And I left early. And I remember because I got back to Atlanta, I believe, on Monday. And he said, hey, I don't want to go to my meeting in New York. I want to come to Atlanta and get back up with you, And I flew him back down to Atlanta on Tuesday. And it was so wow because he gets to Atlanta on Tuesday. And the next day, a friend of mine, Shani Gonzalez, she was working at Epic Records. Now, Epic was LA Reid had just kind of recently went over to Epic, Obviously, LA and I have history, signed Tiata, LA in 1999, and he and I had already been having a bunch of conversations. He had already been, hey, come help me build this label. I'm building Epic, so we were having those conversations already. And fast forward, I get this artist on Tuesday down to Atlanta. On Wednesday, Shani Gonzalez, who worked at Epic, calls me, and she says, hey, I hear you have this guy, Travis Scott, who I'm thinking, how do you know Travis Scott, right? Because he only has 500 views on YouTube, right? So first I'm like, how do you know Travis Scott? But even more than that, how the hell do you know that he's with me right now?
Right.
It's like this is very weird, right? But it just shows you how things are, right? So Shani Gonzalez was an A&R at Epic Records, and her intern was an associate friend. He knew of Travis. I believe they were friends some kind of way, but he knew of Travis, and he turned her on to the music, and she was like, oh shit, she saw what I saw, So literally she calls me on Wednesday and I'm kind of just laughing. I'm like, wow, this is happening. Like, this is, this feels really good, right? Like the way it's flowing right now, So Shani Gonzalez flies to Atlanta on Thursday. She flies to Atlanta on Thursday, and she says, LA Reid's and on vacation this week, right? So she says, I'm coming to Atlanta. Gets here, says, I'm in Atlanta, and I'm not leaving until we go to New York. So the following Monday, I believe, LA's back in office. We all go to New York, and we do a deal. We do a deal, and I mean, everything just lined up so easily, But I'll say this, though. L.A. Reid was such a great executive, L.A., Jimmy Iovine, to me, were like the best music guys, for real. If they believed in an artist, if they believed in talent, they would invest in talent, Of course, it doesn't always work, but clearly they've done it, and it's worked really big, And something that LA told me before, he says, they say I spend a lot of money, but I invest in artists that last for like careers, and they're around far after when I leave, I think that was the dopest thing for Travis that no one probably ever mentions, but just the fact that L.A. Reid was such a music guy that if he believed in you, the executive, if he believed, he's going to invest. A lot of times when 90% of the executives, 99% of the CEOs would say, this just doesn't financially make sense. LA would always take that risk, man. And, I think that played a huge part in Travis's development, because you got to think, this guy was shooting videos with like Nabil, like on day one,
Right.
It was crazy. Like, but yeah, that's the Travis story on how they came about, and it happened super fast. And clearly after that, he went and he met Kanye,
Right.
and very, very soon, very, very soon after he signed, he met Kanye, you know, and clearly Kanye saw the same things that I saw. Yeah,
I mean, his ascension and his own expansion into all sorts of business and interests has been impressive as well.
absolutely.
At the moment, though, I'm sure that everyone was bullish. Everyone thought that he was going to blow up and be successful. Did you all see, though, everything that's happened to him since Astroworld came out? Like, were you expecting that level of success?
I mean, I think with everyone, right? When you're getting behind someone, you're buying into their dream, So you see this success, you see it possible. You have to, because you're co-signing, you're buying in, and if you don't see it, what are you doing it for? So remember, I'm a guy who I've never really been into just chasing like singles and once again just chasing multiple artists, you take someone like Killer Mike, different type of success, but same thing, invested in Killer Mike very early, saw Mike very early, and saw him as this figure that, one day this guy has a potential to like lead our culture and sit on CNN and talk. And if I wanted anybody to go on hip hop's behalf to the White House and talk to the president, send Killer Mike. Like, I believe this early on, right? And it's a great thing when you see that, now the world sees, now this is all developed, and now the world sees what I saw very early on. So I mean, yeah, I absolutely saw it for him as well as others.
No, that's dope. I'll be honest. I was pleasantly surprised, and not necessarily in a bad way, but I've often made the analogy with him to someone like James Harden, right?
Mhm.
When Harden was on the Thunder, saw the talent, knew he was there, and same thing with Travis, even when like Rodeo and like Birds in the Trap dropped. Although like after with Harden, like after that Rockets trade, I wasn't expecting, MVP caliber, like championship expectations. And similarly with Travis Scott, I knew he was going to be good. I didn't expect, all right, after Drake, I think he would be the highest selling rapper right now if everyone was going to drop an album like on the same week. I wouldn't have expected that. And I'm glad
Yeah,
to see it. Now
yeah,
we're seeing him on this Tenet movie. We're seeing him Netflix. He's everywhere. You got this
yeah.
McDonald's thing coming. It's dope.
It's crazy. It's crazy, But I mean, let's be honest too. There's certain. It's easy to say that, and it's understandable to say that. I didn't see it because he added in some social effects too, right? Some social elements as well, which were rocket boosters. When you think about the relationship and things of that nature, right? So, I mean, that
Right.
surely only helps, in the number of popularity in today's world, right?
Right. It
Yeah.
reminds me of when what was it when Astro World dropped. I don't gotta say who, but certain artists were upset about how Kylie Jenner's promotion of Astro World helped as opposed to
Absolutely.
other artists.
Absolutely. Yep.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yep.
So since then though, you've gone on a pretty dope and interesting transition, both with the companies you've started and what you've been doing recently in the past few years. You started Heavy Sound Labs, which is a music incubator, and it's a new model that in many ways I think reflects the generation that we are in music and the landscape of just how things are. How did that idea come about?
Man, so like you said, I started growing up so early, and early, what I was like 22 years old, 21 years old, or something like that, And fast forward throughout this time, that was 2020, and you just say, what does the space look like now? How will it look over the next 5 years? I can't even think about the next 10 years. Like, right? Like, things happen so fast, it's crazy now, especially with technology, you know, disruption is real, right? you know. Um, but for me, as I started making investments in the tech space, I started learning about venture capitalism and really realizing that I had already been, or I had always been a venture capitalist, and I've said, damn, I've invested in so many artists, clearly some that have made it big and some that, damn, they didn't make it. So I say to myself, as I start seeing certain startup studios, right? BetaWorks and Science and these different companies. And I started comparing founders to artists. I say, to me, I look at an artist as a huge corporation. Once again, T.I., look, you diversifying, going to all of these other businesses, Travis Scott, all these other businesses. So this is a huge corporation. So an artist that truly makes it is very similar to a founder, right? Yeah, talent is real, but do you have that relentless energy? Like, as they say, do you have grit? So it's just very similar, and I just started comparing what I was learning to what I had already knew, and that led to me saying that, hey, you know what? I want to invest in artists in this way, more strategically, instead of just blindly saying, hey, here's artist A, I'm going to invest X amount of dollars. I want to say, you know what? I need like multiple artists. And now we have so many tools out here that we can read the data on, right? And make more educated investments. Now we have numbers, right? Spotify, transparency, YouTube, like all of these statistics now, So I say I need to really just kind of mentor these artists, give them information, tell them as much as I can possibly tell them, which is going to be more than most people will tell them, um, and really create a community where we can also collectively collaborate, because I also started thinking about the challenges around new artists. I've always succeeded with new artists, like you said, my history is finding artists that no one really knows, and developing those guys. I'm not really that interested in artists once they're like there, honestly. I'm an entrepreneur in every sense of, I like to build things, and when it's built, I want to do it again, So I started thinking about my career and what I actually enjoy and what I really don't enjoy as much, So I said, okay, cool. This is what I like to do. I like to build artists. So I'm going to develop, and I'm going to be very specific about the ways that I'm going to develop, and now this should make my process more scalable. How can I automate information using the tools, resources that we have available for us, So, and I say, how can I create team community, So I ended up creating a website, heavysound.com, and artists can go click the artist tab, and then there's a series of questions to design to flow as if we're having a conversation. Hey, upload your YouTube, upload this, upload that. And I'm really looking at the ability that an artist has to produce content. I'm not even so much looking at what are your numbers, because they're all early stage artists, but to me, I feel like if you have the ability, if you're like consistently, we listen to the success stories, right? Russ told me, I went to see Russ when he was in the basement, years ago. Carol Lewis called me, hey, you need to meet this guy, Russ. I had no idea who Russ was. Nobody in Atlanta hardly knew who Russ was at this time. I went to see Russ, and I was thrilled by his conversation back then, and I'm so happy and proud for the kid because he stayed down with everything he told me back then.
In terms of the model for Heavy Sound Lab, so as you mentioned, artists apply and as if they're having a conversation through the form that you have. Then
Yep.
what are the next steps for them? Is it a evaluation process to then become part of the Heavy Sounds crew?
Sure. So artist applies. Now it's the evaluation process. It's like I was saying, we're looking at, do you have the ability to consistently put out product, content? Are you on all of the relevant platforms, and of course, what does your music sound like becomes a part of it as well. We have our heavy crew, and these guys can also vote on records, and say if they like a record or not. We onboard specific artists, and you come into our distribution phase. Once you come on as an artist, you it's 3 phases. There's distribution, amplification, and then growth. We start off at an 80-20 split for distribution. for a 20% distribution fee. We give them resources. Of course, we pay out money, collect money, upload all your stuff on the DSPs. We do those typical things, right? You know, we have a web app that we're launching in a couple weeks now, actually, that we've been building that will allow them to monitor all of the traction from, you know, everywhere that they're at, right? On one platform, and compare the information, compare the data, you know. And we also give them office hours. So we give them availability to our team. Now they get office hours. You can talk to team members one-on-one. You get help with your artwork and the resources. We give you strategy on releasing stuff. We critique your music if you want that. You don't have to listen to us, you know, but we're saying that we want to fast track your development process. We want to put a lot of strategy to it. And within 24 months, we want to partner with a major company.
So the goal is to have the artist sign with a major label, or at least have some type of partnership.
The goal is to have a partnership with a major label, you know. So once again, we go from 80-20. We put out music at the right time based on traction. We shift upstream to a 50-50. You know, at that time, as a 50-50, now we put financial resources behind your music, of course, to amplify what you have going on. And our goal is within 24 months to partner at a major label. Really simple, you know. And of course, that partnership can look a million different ways. You know, one artist can say, hey, I don't want to go to a major label, you know, but I'll respond to that and say, and my thing is, I want to deal with big artists, huge artists, you know. That's really the business that I want to be in, you know. It's more than one way to get there, and a huge artist can look a million different ways, but ultimately huge is what I want. You know, so you can go and do a million kind of different deals, a distribution deal with a major, but at the end of the day, you want major resources so that we can get on that big platform.
Right. And I do think that's one thing that people miss out on a bit from this whole conversation of indie versus record label. Right. Of course, it's very timely with artists wanting to maintain ownership of everything. But we were just talking about Russ a second ago. Up until recently, he had the distribution with Columbia. That's how he was able to at least achieve some of the higher levels of mainstream success that he's done in the most recent years. It'll be interesting to see what he does moving after this point. But everything he does moving after this point is in many ways benefit from what he was able to achieve by having a distribution partner in Columbia.
Absolutely, absolutely. But my point really with Russ really was more so the strategy that he created to get to you know, the point of building his audience, you know, literally saying, hey, you know what, I'm releasing a record every Tuesday for 12 months, you know. So, you know, just creating a rigorous routine for real, programming out, you know, your audience to, you know, speak to them in a way that we know the structure, and they have to, you know, I anticipated on Thursday nights at 8:00 watching the Cosby Show growing up.
Right,
you know,
right.
like it's like you gotta set something there, you know. And I think that, you know, when it comes to new artists, do-it-yourselfers, we know that segment is outpacing, you know, every other segment in the music business. You know, do-it-yourselfers. But I think that we also know that they're young, they're new, so they're learning as they go. You know, and we can learn a lot by listening to them, of course, because they're coming with new ideas and thoughts. But there's a lot that they can learn from us as well when it comes to strategy and things of that nature.
Right. So in terms of the incubator model specifically, as you mentioned, you had the 80-20 split for that first phase, then things go to 50-50 after that. And then hopefully by the time they transition to the major label, it would then revert back to 80-20, at least for that final phase. Does that, after that point though, you do maintain some level of equity or some level of ownership in what the artist does moving forward, right?
Sure. At that point, you know, it goes back to 80-20, you know, so we do have a 20% equity cut in the artist deal, you know, and for us, what we're really looking to do, what we're excited about is developing artists to be creative entrepreneurs. So we spoke about Travis, we spoke about Tip. Those guys are creative entrepreneurs. you know, and what you learn around artists, just by looking at the history of artists, artists typically is going to get to a point when they really want to own all of the art themselves for the most part, you know? So for me, I'm banking on the idea of once I'm in business with this young artist, let me help you develop the foundation of your business. Sure, I'll take a back seat, a minor cut, but I'm truly excited about the businesses around you that I can help you develop and actually be 50-50 partners with you on. You know, T.I. and I built the business of Cool. 12 years later, we have a great business. You know, we have another business that came out of that business called Hustle Gang. 8 years later, a great business, you know? So I'm excited about things like that. I'm excited about what's the evolution of hip hop businesses. You know, your podcast is great. You speak about these things, but to me, Grand Hustle, I've done that. Now I can't do new things the old way, right? You know, so now with all of these resources that we have with the cannabis industry here now as an option, with obviously gaming, with, you know, tech being what it is, I'm excited about all of those things, you know?
Right.
So to me, it's like, yeah, I help you as an artist, help you get right early while you're young. You know, you have a young team. We'll provide mentorship for your young team. You go on and you partner with whatever major label. Yes, we're still here for you. You know, to me, it's really about getting in business with an artist and a manager. You know, it's about equipping that manager and being a back office for this manager and wrapping our arms around this artist, but now actually going into other lanes that a young manager does not have time to explore. Right. A young manager is trying to figure out the touring and the day-to-day and you know, and they're consumed with all of those things that it takes to run this business now. And most young managers truly need back office, you know? So for us, that's really how we really, you know, envision this. You know, independence is real. A lot of people truly do want to have ownership, and that's great. That's okay. But success, you know, is what we also need to have the ability to, you know, gain, or else we're going out of business, right?
Right,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
For
Yeah.
sure. And
Mhm.
I like how you are breaking this down. You see what's happening in other areas. You're following what's happening in tech. You're following what's happening in other aspects of entertainment. Are there lanes and areas that you've yet to explore, but you're seeing and you're like, we got to look at that next. We got to follow what's going on.
Wow, man, look at the beauty industry. Talk about lanes. I mean, to me, when you think about female artists and you think about just, you know, the beauty industry, you know, man, to me, that is super exciting. Of course, the cannabis space is super exciting, as we know. Gaming, clearly, so many opportunities, and it's only at the beginning when it comes to integrating culture and music artists into that space, you know. So that's something that I've been very much so, you know, exploring and building it, you know, the gaming space, animation / fantasy, you know. When it comes to that, I feel like for hip hop, like now it's time for us to, there's so many subcultures, there's so many interest points. You think about anime and the fascination within our culture of that. We still have only really seen the Boondocks for real. You
Right,
know,
right,
like,
right.
so I mean, I feel like, man, it's just great times, and those are the ways that I'm thinking about like the future and what's next, you know, because I feel like that's what it takes. It takes the next young kid to see, you know, someone do something to spark the interest and take it even further.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that there's a big opportunity as well with you recently getting involved with All Def Digital. You're one of the investors there. And in many ways,
Correct.
that was when it was initially started was, yes, this is the future of entertainment, looking at things specifically from a hip hop, Black culture perspective. And of course, they've had some transitions in recent years,
Sure.
turnover and all that. But
Yep.
there's a new opportunity to be able to push things from a media perspective. And I do think that media, now every company is being involved in media in some way, but there's a real opportunity to do that, especially the interest of this culture and how that's continued to grow and grow over time.
Man, it's super exciting. You know, All Def is actually the largest African American owned publisher on YouTube as well as Facebook right now, you know. So we had the opportunity to purchase this new media company, which, you know, definitely had a few different transitions in past, but for me, seeing the audience that they built and knowing how expensive it is, right, to build an audience, right?
Right.
Like you talk about content, oh man, it's so expensive to build an audience, you know. You have to clearly invest a lot of money in the process of, you know, production content, but also it takes a lot of time too, you know. Excuse me. So seeing All Deaf and having this, I think it's a great benefit because now we have a super relevant audience, you know, hip hop / comedy. We made the acquisition at the end of 19. Obviously the pandemic started at the beginning of 2020,
Right.
you know, so that immediately brought a challenge on for us. And we've been, you know, still swimming though, you know, we've been rebooting shows and doing what we can via Zoom and things of that nature. But super exciting because the future is so bright on that end. You know, now, like you said, so many companies have another option, another place to speak to. You know, we have a great cast of comedians. You know, when you look at the success of other companies, other new age media outlets like Barstool, you know, and such, I think, you know, we have a lot of potential.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So you've been following what Barstool has been doing in the space?
absolutely.
Yeah. It's
Absolutely.
it's funny because I think that there's a lot of people that will turn their eye at Barstool. And I'll be honest, I did for years as well. Like friends would send me clips and I'm like, you got the wrong one. Like I'm not gonna interested in this. But we see where things are going and we saw how much money this company just sold for, what is it, a year ago, or not even a year ago, it was earlier this year that they sold to
Yeah,
that gaming company.
yeah,
And there's something about this polarizing brand and identity that has a bit of a bad boy image in its sector. But what does that mean? How does that attract? And what does that mean for the audience loyalty and the value that it has? There's something there. And I do think that regardless of how you feel about the content itself, there is value in understanding how they built what they've done.
yeah. I think you hit it spot on, man. It's really, it's a different thing. You know, it's a different consumer, but when you look at those audiences, they're so loyal. They're so loyal. You know, so it's like, okay, when you see the numbers, now you got to be smart enough to know. Forget about my personal views, so to say. You know, let's look at these numbers and what can we do to help these guys grow these numbers even more? What can we, you know, now you got to put that hat on, you know? So I think that like approaching All Deaf in that manner totally makes it super unique in the culture, you know?
Right.
And once again, putting the strategy and, you know, real business behind it, you know, will make it super exciting and interesting, you know. So my guys, Sean Newsom and Cedric Rogers are running All Deaf right now, and we look forward to these new times.
Nice. I like that they got Kev on stage involved. He's hilarious.
Kevin on stage is great. Kevin
Yeah.
on stage is great. Those guys, man. I mean, it's incredible. Like just on the comedy sector, you know, we know that within this culture, comedy is always right within Black culture, within hip hop,
Right. It's been a
however you want to call it.
cornerstone.
It's always been a cornerstone, you know. And what Russell has done, has started for years, you know, in the culture. I mean, it's great, you know, just All Deaf as a brand, you know, the history and the legacy, you know, in that sector. It's interesting, you know. So now it's definitely about what we're gonna do to kind of reinvent and evolve it.
Who are the artists on Heavy Sound Labs that we all should be checking out? Who should we be seeing as the potential to benefit from what you've done and the community and all that to go to that next level?
Man, it's interesting. Heavy Sound, we've been building the Heavy Crew, which is about 1,500 members at this point. You know, we're on Slack. We're talking all day. We're sharing information in different folders. We're, you know, offering these Heavy Talk one-on-one series which is a one-on-one series with proven industry experts. You know, we're giving those things and giving all of this information. And on the artist side, we've been actually pretty selective, because I consider this to be a luxury offering for an artist. This is not for everyone. We're really making investments at an early stage, and we have a team and a staff, So far, we've partnered with an artist named All Star the Great. He's out of Newark, New Jersey. He's super dope, lyrical guy. Had a record that he put out with Benny the Butcher that did really well, and he's actually putting out some more records right now, more videos, so you guys can check him out. All Star the Great. We have another kid, 47 Gino, young guy, 17 years old, out of Miami, Florida, and he's in that young pocket, and he's exciting. So if someone's into younger stuff, you can check him out as well.
And South Florida's been the wave for a minute.
South Florida's been the wave. We partnered with a guy named Ralph Way. Ralph Way, super excited about. We haven't put out a record on him yet. We're about to put out a visual. This kid is from South Africa, lives in Massachusetts, young, 24 years old, I believe, and he directs his own videos as well. Ralph Way, super dope. That's going to be very interesting. His story is I'm excited about him as well, And then we've partnered also with a kid named Lango out of Baton Rouge. Lango, super dope. Produces. This kid is from Baton Rouge, lives in New Orleans, went to Xavier University, majored in biology, graduated, producer, and just kind of comes with a different perspective, So these kids that we're really partnering with at this early stage, we're serious about it, and serious about really developing them the right way. For me, I do feel like I have a history and a legacy that I want to upheld, right? I don't want to just do things just to be doing them. So we're using technology, but it still is the music business, So, I'm still kind of integrating both factors.
Dope.
Yeah.
And you mentioned you have 1,500 people in there now. How many people apply versus how many people have gotten in?
Man, I mean, on the Heavy Crew side, let me speak about that for 1 second, right?
Yeah.
So the Heavy Crew is a collective of creatives, so people that want to be a part of the process. Once again, anybody can go to heavysound.com. You can hit the Heavy Crew tab. Series of questions, design. This to me is in my mind, this is the evolution of internship programs, the evolution of street teams. This is the modern day. I've been a part of both. I've had my own interns, had my own street teams, So I've said, man, I've made great relationships at that early stage, and most executives that have success, they come down that path, So what does that look like in today's world? It's digital, right? Like if music's being consumed and if artists are building digitally, how do I help the future executives build digitally? So now I say we're no longer hanging up posters and giving out flyers and stickers. So now we're posting, we're hashtagging, we're retweeting, things of that nature, So for the Heavy Crew, the dopest thing about what I'm doing, which truly really sets me apart from anyone else, is literally the Heavy Crew. Every new artist, the one of the biggest challenges for a new artist is no one knows me. So now when I put something out, no one's retweeting my stuff. No one's really, even my friends aren't doing this mostly, right? Most of a new artist, like their friends aren't even really supporting them because it's not cool to support you until somebody else is supporting you. That's really kind of like how it is, So in my mind, I said like, wow, in today's world, if I have a new artist and if I can create a challenge, if I have a community and I can say to my community, hey guys, we're going to release 47 Gino's record on Tuesday called No Mercy, at 2:00. Here's the artwork. We're going to all post this at 2:00 and hashtag No Mercy. And now if I have 50 Heavy Crew members, 100, 200, 500. Obviously, as the community grows, those activation numbers will grow, But more than anything, even if a new artist has 25 people posting, that's a lot more than you have by yourself.
Right.
You know what I
Right.
mean?
Right.
So to me, you know, that's really how I'm looking at this heavy crew, and it's great because we share information, we kind of trade off on resources, and literally, man, it's becoming like a social utility to a degree for people who are going to be the future managers or currently young managers and want jobs and things of that nature. That's the best thing about it is they don't owe me anything. You know, me and my team, we're giving away the information. They can have an artist that they're managing, and the artist could be somewhere else, you know, not even on our label, you know. So to me, I feel like no one's offering that, and I know that that's going to grow into something that's far more bigger than, you know, myself. So I'm happy to do it.
That's dope. You're building community, man. You're building in the
Yeah,
right ways.
yeah, appreciate
That's
it,
what's
man. But
up.
that's what it's about in today's world, right?
Yeah,
Like,
no,
yeah,
definitely. Well,
yep.
Jason, it's been a pleasure. I'm glad you came on. Anything else that you'd like to plug quickly or let the Trapital audience know about?
Nah, man. Thank you, Dan, for having me. You know, definitely keep doing your thing, and everyone check us out at heavysound.com.